Hey everyone, Shark here, and I noticed something interesting with the new banners that may be a trend in the future. But before I go over this potential trend, I want to do a quick review of the characters and weapon banners because we got some new information about these banners and there's a lot of good, but you still may want to avoid them. First, let's start off with the Cyno character banner. We have Cyno, Kuki Shinobu, Candace, and Sayu. These 4 stars are okay, but definitely not as good as the 4 stars on the Ganyu and Kokomi banner just before them. Kuki was a pretty meh character when she was first introduced, but the introduction of the Dendro element has been good to her. She's really useful in Aggravate and Hyper Bloom teams, and is also able to provide healing, which most of these teams have very little options for at the moment. She also looks really cool and has a really awesome normal attack animation, though you probably won't be using that too much. Now when it comes to Sayu, she's always been decent. She's sort of like a mini Jean, but she does less overall damage and healing than Jean. However, Sayu has some more unique team options than Jean because it's easier for her to provide multiple swirls off-field. And one of these teams happens to be Aggravate. Because Aggravate teams want an Animo character with the VV Shred, but their healer options are quite limited, so Sayu can fill the role pretty well. Now I should mention that people often use Venti, Kazuha, or Sucrose over Sayu because the damage amplification and utility those characters bring is way more valued than Sayu's healing. But overall, Sayu is an okay option with a lot of potential for versatility. And then we have Candace. Now we know very little about her right now, but from the 3.1 livestream, we know that she is a normal attack buffer with a skill that works similar to a parry/counter and a burst that infuses melee attacks with hydro damage. Basically, think of her like Yunjin, but with the ability to give hydro infusion. Overall, the general feeling for her right now is that she isn't going to be amazing, and she will require a lot of testing. Now, I personally really love her design, so I'm definitely pulling for her. So if you want to know my thoughts about her as soon as possible, then you can come check me out on Twitch and I'll answer any of your questions live, provided of course that I don't get washed away by this giant upcoming hurricane. And if you could help me by hitting that like and sub button so I don't turn into a giant Sharknado, I would really appreciate it. With all that said though, Candace is a Hydro character, which is definitely one of the top tier elements in the game. Her infusion could open up the double Hydro team for a lot of people, which are also really strong teams. And giving infusion to other characters just opens up so many different possibilities. I'm personally really excited to run a few meme teams with her, but I can see something like Candace, Bennett, and on-field Xingqiu being really good. And it might sound really odd to use Xingqiu on field, but his rain swords don't snapshot Bennett's burst, so if he's on field in Bennett's burst, they get the huge attack buff from Bennett. And with Candace, she's not only buffing his normal attacks, but also making all of his normal attacks into Hydro. So a team like this could be quite strong and very satisfying to play. Maybe not as strong or satisfying as Xingqiu Yulan, but at least it seems like Candace will bring a lot of versatility and options to different teams, which is what I really love in a character. And then we have Cyno. Now I love his design and VA, but honestly I think he's going to be just okay, definitely not game breaking. And people are saying he's just going to be a 5-star Razor, and he obviously has some similarities. He's definitely a hyper carry, but one of the main problems I see is that he seems to want a lot of field time, and therefore he really likes a shield character like Zhongli, and basically every other character to support him, rather than doing their own damage. Another problem I see is that Cyno and Keqing seem to have similar roles, and for many people that already have Keqing, Cyno might actually be just a straight downgrade. Keqing also doesn't require nearly as much field time, and she is a little bit more flexible because of that. But again, we'll need to do more testing to find out. And once again, if you want a character for their power level, do not pull immediately. Wait for about a week or so and we'll figure out all the good, the bad, all the bugs, and the major considerations so you don't waste your primos. Finally, on the alternate side of the character banner, we have Venti. And Venti is still an extremely good character, but for some reason feels a little bit undervalued right now. People seem to think that if Venti can't suck up all the enemies on screen with his burst, then he's somehow bad, But the truth is, Venti is still incredibly useful because his burst not only does a ton of damage, but its elemental infusion returns 15 energy to all of your party members of the same infused element. Honestly, Venti, Kazuha, and Sucrose are the top 3 Anemo characters we have in the game, and they're so useful that you typically want at least 2 of them, one for each side of the abyss. So if you still don't have Venti, he's still an amazing support. He is a great character to pick up because he does so many things well, and in content that is quote-unquote Ventiable, where enemies are lightweight and can be CC'd, he's basically just an auto win button. So overall, the 4 stars are okay. It's pretty clear that they are meant to be Aggravate or Hyper Bloom focused. And so if you are trying to build an Aggravate or Hyper Bloom team, these characters might be a pretty good pickup for you. And while there definitely are better character options like Fischl or Beto for the Electro slot, Xingqiu for the Hydro slot, or Sucrose for the Anemo slot, these characters will definitely still work in those teams. Now for the 5 stars, Cyno still feels like he might be a bit below average, and Venti is still great. And now that we've done a quick overview of these characters, it's time to move on to the weapon banner, and this is where things get juicy. Now the first thing I want to say is that the weapon banner is still a giant trap that's like throwing all of your primos into a bottomless well. But this one's actually pretty good. The 5-star weapons look great, the spear gives you a ton of crit and increases your attack based on how much elemental mastery you have. This spear is obviously great for Cyno, but it's also great for Zhongling and Hu Tao for vaporized teams, and Rosaria for reverse melt teams. Overall, it's a pretty good weapon that can be used by a good variety of characters, which gives it a pretty good amount of value. And then the other 5-star weapon we have on the banner is the Elegy for the End, which is a really powerful support weapon that can significantly increase your team's damage. This weapon is so useful that it can even take characters like Amber who've been thrown into obscurity and make her relevant in meta teams. Now just another warning about the weapon banner, if you do get a 5-star on the weapon banner, you only have a 75% chance to get one of these 2 featured weapons and a 25% chance to get a random other 5-star weapon. And of course, if you're going for one weapon specifically, you need to make sure that you have enough wishes to get 3 5 stars. So obviously this is kind of giant whale bait. But with that warning out of the way, let's talk about the 4-star weapons on this banner, which are also really good. We've got the Favonius Warbow and the Favonius Lance. Now the Favonius weapons are some of the most useful in the game, and the bow and the lance actually end up being some of the most useful out of that entire weapon series. Being able to generate energy for your team is incredibly important, and often having one character with a Favonius weapon or 2 characters with 2 Favonius weapons on one team often solves so many different problems. We also have the Lion's Roar, which is also a good weapon for characters like Keqing, but it's even really good on characters like Xingqiu and the Raiden national team, which is what I personally use. Since I have enough energy recharge to make sure that Xingqiu gets up his burst on time, especially with Raiden, I can use this weapon instead to pump out even more damage than using a Sacrificial Sword or a Favonius Sword. Next, we've got the Sacrificial Fragments, which is pretty good on Sucrose. It's not a bad catalyst, but generally you're going to go for something like the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, which just offers more value for your entire team. Next, we have the new weapon, the Makaira Aquamarine. This Claymore is probably the worst of the 4-star weapons, not because it's a bad weapon, but just because not a lot of characters can really unlock its potential. It gives elemental mastery and then also increases your attack and your team's attack by a percentage of the wielder's elemental mastery. So this weapon is pretty decent on a character like Sayu, but if you really want to get the full value out of this weapon, then you need a Claymore character who wants to build tons of EM, which is basically just C6 Sayu. However, it's still a good option even for a character like Diluc who wants some elemental mastery, but having the attack buff for himself and the team is also quite nice. So the weapon is pretty decent, but unfortunately there's not a lot of characters who can truly unlock its potential, at least as of 3.1. So to recap, we have an okay character banner with Venti as seemingly the best of all the characters, but we have a really solid weapon banner. And I noticed an interesting trend or pattern. This is actually very similar to the situation we had way back in 2.0 and 2.1, just before the release of Raiden. The Ayaka character banner was pretty meh, even though Ayako is a really good character herself, but the weapon banner for Ayaka was really nice. And then the Raiden banner came out and the characters on that banner were really good, but the weapon banner was terrible. Now based on some timelines and potential trends, I'm predicting that 3.2 will follow a similar pattern. I'm predicting the Dendro Archon will be out in 3.2, and also that the value of the banners will be the opposite of the upcoming ones. Meaning it will be just like what we've seen before, where the character banner will be great and the weapon banner will be terrible. However, this could be completely wrong because 3.2 will put us right around Halloween time, which is typically when Hu Tao has her reruns, and the Staff of Homa banners have historically been really good. And just as I was about to post this video, I see that Genshin's Twitter has revealed that the Dendro Archon and a new character named Layla will indeed be coming in 3.2, so let's see if the other predictions I make will come true as well. Though I'm curious, have you noticed that we get one patch with a good character banner and a bad weapon banner, and then it flip-flops to where we get a patch with a bad character banner but pretty good weapon banner? Or am I just a crazy shark finding patterns where there aren't any? Please let me know your thoughts below. I hope this review was helpful and I can't wait to pull Candace and run some meme teams while dodging a bunch of the Candies jokes from all the Sino lovers in chat. And I hope my speculation can bring about a good discussion that can help us with future banners. Have a lovely day everyone, stay jawsome, and I will see you in the next one.